Zoe, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us today about your experience as a NED. Could you begin by telling us very quickly something about your executive career and when you started your board work?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me, Cathy. So I've done 20 years as a banker, ending as the CEO of a German merchant bank, and then I went to work for fund managers. I've set up my own fund management company called New Bond Street Asset Management, which I sold. And after that, I've been working really with SMEs. So I've done a very broad range of things, from general management, but also fundraising, managing product-specific areas, fixed rate income. I'm mostly a debt person, but I've also had lawyers, and I've been head of credit for the German merchant banks. I've been speaking to the board.
Okay, brilliant. Tell us about the very first board position that you held and how you achieved that appointment.
So I thought that I was going to stop doing an executive job. I'd left my executive career, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I've been approached by a headhunter. This would suit you because you know a lot about housing. It's a building society. Would you be interested to apply for the role?" So I said, "Well, it sounds interesting. Let's try it." What, of course, I never foresaw is that I would then be invited to do more executive work, and so I was running both a non-executive and an executive role at the same time.
Now, this is really
Thoughtfully. So it takes time. I mean, we have to be realistic. Being an NED is a tremendous commitment. You have the same responsibilities as if you're an executive. They will send you a board pack that's anywhere between 200 and 500 pages. When you're experienced, it probably still takes about 3 hours to read that.
wow.
You've then got to attend the meeting, and you've got to travel to meetings because they're not necessarily on the doorstep. But nevertheless, I think it was easier for me to do that because actually my executive job was a 4-day-a-week job, and I actually negotiated that because I knew I had NED responsibilities. People can do it. They can do being an executive with being an NED. It's easier if it's in an industry or a sector where you're really on top of the material. So, for instance, the chap who's now the chairman of New Building Society works for the Housing Finance Corp. He's also chair of a building society. There's tremendous synergy there.
Okay. Talking about the sector and being really interested in the sector, how important is that when you're starting your board career?
I think it's about enjoyment, isn't it? You want to do something that you enjoy, where you feel you can contribute. So I think you need to look at what you've been doing, not just your skills base, but also which industries do you know about, and how could your knowledge be applicable to that industry, because it makes you more likely to be selected as the candidate and easier for you to contribute in board meetings because you have a kind of general knowledge that helps you with your sector.
And in terms of your functional roles as an executive and the expertise that is most helpful in the boardroom, what would you say that is?
Well, first of all, the thing that's very interesting about being in the boardroom is that you get a fantastic overview of an entire business. Whereas in an executive function, you're often in a silo. Even if you're a senior manager, you're probably only getting a relatively limited perspective on the business you're managing. I think you've got to be a good listener. You've got to be willing to learn, and you've got to want to ask questions and debate things. And frankly, common sense goes a long way, I think, in being a success in the board.
And being confident with your own voice and your own ethical standpoint and your ability to question decisions.
I think that's right. Clearly, when you're initially on a board, it's difficult to gauge how many questions you should ask, whether your questions are really penetrating enough, and therefore you spend some time talking to people outside the boardroom, maybe sending emails of questions beforehand to work out exactly what calibre of question is really appropriate for the sector you're in. But having said that, the first board meeting I went to, we had a presentation on risk. It was a very good presentation. It was clearly what a regulator would be looking for. But under any other business, I actually said, look, we've sat here for 2.5 hours, but the problems we've identified in our organisation are not reflected really in this risk presentation we've had. There's a gap, it's too high level, the organisation is here. We perhaps need a task and finish group, great phrase that I learned from being an NED.
Task and finish group.
And we should work together to produce a risk map that actually is really embedded in our business. That was a common sense issue only, and that's exactly what we did.
And are you typically, as a female, in the minority? In
Not necessarily. Things are getting a lot better, and I work in the housing sector, and housing is an area where there are a lot of women. So in fact, on our board we have very good diversity in terms of gender, race, religion. So we are a very well-rounded organisation.
So have you seen a change in the ratio of diverse board members since you started your board career?
I mean, I've only been in a board career for 7 years, but yes, I think things have improved dramatically. And of course, there's a lot of diversity training now that boards have to go through. So it is at the forefront of people's thinking when they're hiring, whether it's executive, non-executive, chairs, etc.
Okay. And when you think of so you've got a dual identity, you've still got your executive career and you have your board career. Do you find that you have to sort of sway between different personas depending on where you're sitting?
Not really. I mean, you sound a bit Jekyll and Hyde.
Well, the reason I ask the question is because one of the challenges wannabe NEDs have is using language that is more NED-like than executive-like.
That's very true, yes.
And it's often thought of as an interim career where you kind of roll your sleeves up and help out. So it's just really changing your your objective in terms of your role and saying, well, I'm there to protect, guide, question, challenge, and so on, not necessarily do the job.
I absolutely agree with you. No, I see what you're getting at. So the famous phrase, insight, oversight, and foresight is what maybe board members are most focused on providing. But you're absolutely right. First of all, I think you need to literally train yourself to be an NED. And frankly, one of the things there is not paying too much to do that, because you don't necessarily know how quickly you can capitalise on that investment. But there are certainly, you need to read books about exactly what's involved in being an NED, about legislation, the law in terms of what you're expected to be able to do. It is a different approach. You are actually like marking someone's homework. Yeah. You're not doing the job yourself, you're reviewing what they've done and acting as their critical friend. So, being supportive and friendly and open and helpful, but being a bit tenacious when there's a problem and trying to get to the bottom of, well, have you really answered this issue that I've raised? And that can be quite tricky because, of course, the executive's natural desire is to say, oh, I've done everything and it's perfectly done, and to slightly shut down if they get approached with, well, did you think about this? So it's learning how to raise issues with people. It may be that you also raise issues outside the room, and therefore people don't feel, very important that they're not ambushed in a meeting, that they realise where you're coming from. I mean, I've often sent emails saying, could you tell me a bit more about this, so they can come to a meeting with researched information rather than being asked a question they possibly couldn't know the answer to right there.
Yeah. You mentioned the board papers earlier and the time it takes to get through them. And we know that having an accountancy background is often an easier way into the boardroom for everybody. How hard are the numbers piece? What would you say to people that feel they have a huge amount of skill in other areas, maybe tech, maybe human resources, maybe marketing and sales even, but are less comfortable with looking at the figures?
I think this is a very important issue that you've highlighted. We need on a board people with all types of skill base. But I know from the board that I'm on at the moment, where I chair the Treasury Committee, they actually asked me, oh, could you and the Finance Director give us one or two presentations about what we really need to think about and the topics that you've been raising and how you've been getting on with them. Because to be honest, from people who are not from a financial background, it is harder for them to be really comfortable with the numbers, to be absolutely on top of it.
And it's quite exposing, isn't it, if you're not? Because, you know, you could find yourself in a situation that you don't understand, but is, you know, really quite important.
I think this is where, you need to go behind the scenes and ask to meet with people, perhaps in the Treasury Department, and say, look, could you go over this with me? The other thing is, it's from the accountancy point of view, to ask to meet with the accountants for the firm and say, can I go through with you, you know, the key accounting principles that are running this company, some key challenges that they've had, why you structure the accounts the way you do, whatever it is you want to ask.
And that's a culture question, isn't it? It moves into having an environment where the culture allows you to be respected for your strengths and supported for the areas where you're less comfortable.
I think that's absolutely true, and very, very important. You want a friendly, receptive environment where people are inviting you in and asking you to help them. I think one of the problems with boards is, you know, you can be in a situation where actually they don't really want much help. They don't want to say that, but the truth is they just want to get on with the way they've been doing things, and they may be extremely able people, but you're more like a rubber stamp, and that is, frankly, first of all, I think that's not very enjoyable, and secondly, of course, it's risky.
Yeah, you see that at the really big FTSE companies, don't you, where names are everything and actions are not that important.
They've hired you because you're going to look good in the accounts and on the website.
Yeah.
Yes.
One's the last question. When you think about the CV that you produce when you're interested in a NED position as opposed to your executive position, how hard was it for you to reduce that into something which was really the sum of all your parts rather than everything you've ever done?
It does require a lot of thought. So your CV and making an application to become an NED is quite an art form. And I think you do need some training to do that. So for instance, I've been on Women on Boards and I thought they were excellent. Very sensible people with good programs, not particularly expensive, very nice to meet other people. But it's not just the presentation of your CV, it's the covering letter. And if you're going on something like Neural, you know, that Neural asks you in a very concise format, no more than 250 words, why are you appropriate for this job? And you have to look very carefully at the position description, identify exactly what they're looking for, and answer only what they have asked you for. And that's why it's very important to pick jobs where actually you probably are a good fit. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of time.
I couldn't agree more. That is my mantra.
So first of all, make sure that the position description is something that you think you could really fulfill, and don't hesitate to call either the headhunter or somebody from the company, if they've given their name, to talk to them about the role and see whether you really are a fit, so that you save your time. In making the application, you definitely need to read their accounts, look at their webpage, look at any other literature that they put out about themselves, so that you're really informed and you can craft your application letter, your covering letter, to show that you understand the business, that the challenges that they have are things that you could help them with, and to ask some important and interesting questions should you get to an interview. I think it's worth also looking at who are you going to be replacing on the board. Have a look at the CVs of the board members. Are they the sort of people that you think you would enjoy working with, that you gel with, that are a complementary role to your own skills base? Knowing who you are replacing might tell you a bit about what they want out of you, because also it's about career progression on the board. They're often looking for people who could become the chair of the audit, HR, risk, these other committees. And you need to think about what is important to me, not just joining a board, but getting on in my board career, perhaps ultimately even becoming a chairperson of a company.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Zoe. Really appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you again soon.
It's been very nice chatting to you, Cathy. Thank you.
You.